All right, it's 8 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and start. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our webinar this morning. Thank you, AGS, very much for hosting me and hosting this and also providing resources for all of the members right now. I thought it might be a good idea to just kind of outline a few of kind of what I've seen are some of the best creative marketing ideas for jewelry that have come up in the last maybe 8 weeks or so that I have seen. And I think there's a lot of confusion and a lot of concern out there about what might be appropriate, what might be sort of reaching customers right now in a way that's sensitive to kind of what's happening right now. So I actually came up with this idea after Conclave, but just a little bit about myself. If you're not familiar with who I am, I'm Monica Stephenson. I'm the founder of idazzle.com and the responsible gemstone company Anza Gems. And I travel to East Africa several times a year. I visit mining regions and I buy rough, and I have those rough gemstones actually faceted by US faceters. And then I sell those wholesale to designers and retailers, and 10% of my sales go back into the mining regions where they come from in East Africa, in Tanzania and Kenya specifically, with an increasing focus on kind of supporting women in the supply chain. So that's a little bit about me. And I also founded idazzle.com, which was in 2008. And so the digital realm for me is pretty comfortable. I've had a large sort of interaction with social media since the beginning, starting with Twitter and then Instagram. So I'm pretty well positioned in that sphere, hopefully to give a little bit of guidance. I don't know how many others are experiencing conclave withdrawal. It was 2 days, but it seemed like it flew by last week. Conclave translated, I think, pretty well to the digital sphere. Virtual conclave was definitely a highlight of my week last week. I was really impressed with the sense of community that happened even in this we're all sitting in our own homes, kitchens, or in some cases mother-in-law's bedrooms, but yet we were all able to kind of connect. And the chat was particularly, I think, good at that. I think there was this pent-up demand to connect. And while I've had the pleasure and honor of attending actual conclaves in the past, I felt like there was at least approaching that level of community kind of in this virtual sphere. The chat was like flying by, dizzying speed, but there were a lot of ideas, there were a lot of conversations, and there were like questions and concerns that kind of came out of that that I think kind of led directly to this presentation. So I found that all of the sessions were engaging and really interesting, but I think there was the most sort of confusion and sort of banter around what is appropriate to market for jewelry right now. We're in obviously very challenging times right now. There is actual physical suffering, there is financial suffering. All of those things are actually very real and very present. So some people kind of express concern over marketing jewelry, which could be seen as frivolous or not essential kind of right now. And while I agree that you can't just keep having your same message, you can't do the same Mother's Day campaign or graduation campaign that you thought you were going to do 8 or 12 weeks ago, that would be tone deaf. If you just hammer home product after product or whatever your campaign might have been, if you're not kind of adjusting and calibrating that, I think that's probably a mistake. But I would argue that we can't disappear right now. We can't retreat and hide. I think that jewelry is essential to some people. It's a source of connection. It is a source of beauty and celebration, and those things are also really important right now. So let's not hide. You can tell people that you're here. You can tell people that you care. That could be the cornerstone of your messaging. For instance, a couple of people said that they were writing handmade, handwritten notes to their customers, their clients, in their, retail markets. You could do the same thing if you're a supplier. There's something about that human touch and that very handmade human element that would go a long ways right now. And again, it's not something like, oh, they can click and buy something. This is truly just reaching out and telling someone that you care. So you need to be there, hopefully, when they need it, whether that's next week or 6 months from now, or even a year from now, if that's when they're finally ready to really think about that. I'd also like to point out that there is, while there is real financial hardship and the loss of a lot of wealth right now, there's also a bit of a redistribution of wealth, where people are not able to travel. They are simply not able to, and nor can they host a wedding, a big gathering, a big party. So some of those funds, I think if you do it right, it could be a very meaningful, really incredible way to commemorate all the moms, for instance, who have had to wear so many hats, and all the students and graduates who are really deprived of all of their kind of major other milestones, but you could give them something lasting that actually will transcend this time. So jewelry is lasting, it's tangible, it's significant, it's emotional. Those are all of the kinds of things that we need to be tapping into right now. So there were a lot of interesting ideas thrown out there. People who are doing things that are, truly kind of interesting and creative. And I thought I kind of loosely kind of gathered these things into a few different categories. But they all share the sort of the common denominator of they're meant to be digital and social media kind of engagement. They hopefully are all relatively appropriate for what's happening right now. And the creative part, though, kind of needs to come from you. I'm not recommending that you take these ideas and just wholesale apply them to your own business, because we all have our own voice. We all have our own community. We all have our own brand, and we have to kind of still stay true to that. And right now, people are especially sensitive to inauthenticity. Like, you really need to be your true self right now. And that's what people tend to be reacting to. So a lot of some of the things that I'm going to talk about, people have put a fair amount of time or their effort or energy into creating these campaigns. So it's not really about copying the campaigns. It's about taking the bits and pieces that might work for your business and then figuring out how do you transform that into your own message. So as an industry, we are really well positioned for distraction. And I think that particularly early on in the whole lockdown and everybody's at home, people were spending a ton of time, on their phones, on Instagram, taking a break from the constant news cycle and actually kind of trying to kind of connect with their communities. At least that's what I found on Instagram. So as a company, Onza Gems, we went back to the basics of like, okay, now is the time to kind of think about our branding, really try to push our digital, like launch our website finally and dust off some things that we need to do. And then we really thought about our social media campaigns. Now, this is what I said we were going to do at the beginning of this whole process. What we've actually accomplished might be like, this is like, do as I say, don't do as I do. But we have done some interesting things, and I think we've come up with some good ideas. One of the ideas that came out of this was, we have a pretty strong digital media presence. Like, people are used to finding us online. We also have a philanthropic message, kind of that 10% of sales going back into things. So I think right now, with people are going to look for companies to do business with or to buy from, they really are appreciating kind of that social responsibility part of things. So my associate Megan, who I have to give total 100% credit for this, in mid-March, when we were on lockdown in early March, but then they started canceling all the sports, everything. And she was really missing March Madness. And she's like, okay, this is a crazy idea. And that's always when I listen, because the crazy ideas are usually the best ideas. Or there's a nugget in there somewhere. She's like, what if we did Gemstone March Madness and we pit these different gemstones against each other through our Instagram stories, and then we'll end up kind of, over the course of a couple of weeks, we'll kind of get to a winner. And I was like, that sounds perfect. It's like sparkle. It's unapologetic, distraction. So we started posting, and what was interesting is that this started out as just pure distraction, but we ended up with Anna Gilbert she's a gem cutter in North Carolina. Her Instagram handle is Treblig Anna, and she's cut some gems for me before. I like to support women in the supply chain. And she said, what if I cut the winning rough gemstone? Like I could cut whatever ends up winning. And then we took it a step further and thought, okay, well, let's auction that off for a COVID related charity. So this started out as distraction. It ended up as collaboration, and then finally ended up with a philanthropic twist. So I kind of think that if we're going to do distraction, it's okay to do some unapologetic, like, ooh, look at the pretty gemstones. Again, we're in a beautiful industry. We can really leverage that, but make sure to maybe even call it distraction. You can call it, this is something sparkly in your feed. This is something beautiful that we thought you would appreciate. And you never know where that might lead to. You never know where that might go. Actually, Anna is cutting the gemstone maybe as we speak. And so we're going to get a whole nother level of mileage out of that winning piece, and doing an online, we'll do an Instagram auction for that. I already have people like raring to go to bid on that. So yes, I'm not going to get any personal, gain out of this in terms of, a sale, but I do get some really amazing kind of digital media, social media mileage out of this. So just something kind of fun and starting with distraction, but ending up a little bit more involved. There were a number of other things that were happening kind of around the same time. Parlay, AGS members, they did an auction of 3 different items that benefited different, again, kind of COVID related charities, including Gem Legacy and Manos and his Mask Collective. There are, jewelers who did a percent of sales, 10%, 20%, either to local charities or global kind of entities. And then there's also been kind of a surge of giveaways. What is one thing that we have right now? Most of us probably have inventory. What do we not have right now? Not a lot of cash. So Wing of Wake Jewelry, she sort of leveraged that into a giveaway for healthcare workers. And I noticed that Omi Gems was doing a really pretty spectacular necklace. I think that's kind of coming up to when they're going to award that. So you nominate your healthcare superhero, and then they could win this piece of jewelry. So I've seen a few different twists and spins to that. But the point is, like, kind of engaging at that more meaningful level of kind of responsibility and taking care of people and generosity. But I also want to mention that this is Manos and Kelly who are making the masks right now. They were a beneficiary of a couple of different, I think, fundraisers. And also he donated, I think, Carter's shirt, mask, and that was auctioned off for AGS. So there's a lot of different ways that you can spin this, but it's also okay to say that we're having a sale or an auction to benefit your own team or to support your own business to keep it afloat, people are getting that right now. The pain factor has really kind of set in for people. We're no longer in the shock and awe phase early on. People will get that this is what you need to do in order to keep your business running. So don't be afraid to use that as messaging too. It doesn't necessarily have to benefit anyone. I think at the core of kind of all of these ideas, though, is a bit of like why we buy. Why do we buy jewelry? What is it that we are seeking when we purchase? And for most people, this is, meaning. There's some celebration, there's some significance behind most jewelry purchases. Yeah, sometimes, somebody will walk in and shove a ring on their finger and say, oh, I love it, and walk out with it. And that's fantastic. But especially right now, I think that people are connecting to the meaning of what's behind the purchase. I spoke to John Carter of Jack Lewis Jewelers, and I think that they had done a really, really good job with this particular idea of what this means. And that's this is building on a campaign that they've actually had in existence for a number of years, but they've kind of pivoted and kind of spun it a bit to kind of fit the appropriateness of now. So you can see the beautiful like distraction posts. And again, he was like, here's something pretty in your feed. But interspersed with that are these really lovely, just his employees in their homes. And they, talk to the camera, they talk about a significant piece of jewelry, who gave it to them, what does it mean to them, what's the significance, and some of them got really personal and really maybe even emotional. But what's interesting about this is, it's very human, it's very approachable, and it's just reinforcing why we buy jewelry. But there's nothing salesy, right? This is not an existing piece of jewelry that someone can buy, but it's reinforcing this is meaningful. This is why we do this. And he said it's been really well received. There's a lot of ways that you could do this. And actually, I think you could take this even a little bit further maybe and go to your customers. This might be a touch point to go out into your community, and maybe that's an email, maybe that's a direct message, and say, hey, what's your most significant piece of jewelry? And have them photograph it on their, preferably wearing it. I think it's much more sort of powerful when it's being worn and you can see how it's loved. These are real hands, real people, real pieces of jewelry that might be, in need of a cleaning, even perhaps after, however long in lockdown at home. But, the idea that you could feature their stories on your social media, whether that's Facebook or Instagram, it could be a little video if they're comfortable with that, or as simple as a photo, little picture and a little story about why it's significant, why it's important to them. And then if you were to tag the designers or the brands that are involved, they could pick that up. Like it's a kind of a ripple effect of meaning and emotion. So I think that it's not a hard sell at all. Sorry, and it engages your community and kind of puts that human side front and center. Collaborations, I think, definitely need to be looked at right now. People have, time, and you can actually kind of look at your community and see who can you actually work with or sort of help out. Approach it as collaboration can get sort of a bad rap, but collaborations are literally better than the sum of their parts. So think about how you can add value to another business and approach it from that direction. And I think that everybody will win. So retailers could go really hyper local, helping support. There was a lot in the chat at Conclave about supporting local restaurants, and that's fantastic. Actually, in Seattle, we ordered a pizza from the local pizza company, not a chain, but local Pagliacci Pizza, and they delivered the pizza with a spice packet of another restaurant group in Seattle, also independent, also homegrown, that has actually chosen to close their doors right now for their employees' safety, for the burn rate of like trying to run these restaurants during this time. And I was like, oh yeah, this is so great. Like the restaurants kind of collaborating with each other. I don't forget the other brand this way. And I'm much more likely to order more pizza from Pagliacci because they are supporting another local brand. So thinking about ways that you can kind of collaborate, support, help. It could be that you team up with restaurants to provide meals for healthcare workers. That's always kind of a nice way to go. I included this photo. It's actually no one I know, but it's kind of illustrating this, something that I know of a jeweler in, she's like a personal jeweler, kind of custom work in Denver, and she does Try On Tuesday. And so she does curbside pickups of uh, uh, clothing, like from local lifestyle and clothing stores, and she will try on some of the clothing and she pairs it with her jewelry and she talks about what might work with that. And it's kind of a conversation about jewelry and how it fits into your wardrobe, your lifestyle, everything. But it also kind of helps support that other retailer, whether that's lifestyle, clothing, whatever that might be. And you're able to kind of, kind of capitalize on that. She also does, she does like live Instagram interviews with like just fun conversations over a glass of rosé with, in her business, wedding support planning is really important. And all of those people are kind of idle right now, but you can still talk about what goes into kind of the planning of events. And she talks to a lot of different people. So don't be afraid of live. That's another thing to kind of consider. Suppliers could feature their partners, whether that is like their, say artisans who help make their things, or their retailers. Marla Aaron, who is a jewelry designer based in New York, who kind of has thrown away the playbook of what what constitutes jewelry marketing. She doesn't come from the industry, and so she does not follow the rules, and it's been incredibly successful for her. She started doing a series right when this all started of featuring her retail partners on these like live chats, live Instagram, like a series. And she calls them partners for a reason. She actually looks for ways to help support and promote their businesses as well. So she did a whole series where they're kind of in either their bedrooms or their living rooms, and they're talking about, what do you miss about having your doors open? How are you taking care of customers right now? What's happening in your life? I, for one, would love to see like a conversation between Naveed Nagpal and Melissa Quick, and maybe you have this conversation again about what are you doing? Like how are you surviving? There are things that can come out of that are very real, great ideas, and you're supporting your partners. So I really like that idea. Maybe it's like tales from the vault, and you're each in your respective vaults or in your respective homes, and you're talking about kind of what's critical right now, because it's all critical to us. So again, don't be afraid of live. This has been, I think, one of the single biggest transitions in the industry of like everybody feeling like, oh, live is too scary, and I have to be photo ready. I have to have hair and makeup. I have to be perfectly on point on message. A lot of this is really conversational. It's kind of pulling the veil back a little bit. People are loving, I think, that personal kind of connection with brands. So don't be afraid of it, and look for ways to kind of support your community. And that brings me to this idea of how do we leverage digital to connect with people and kind of do these kind of shared experiences. I'm going to use Naveed again as an example of, he thought it was really interesting. One of his local wineries was going to do a virtual wine tasting. So you can purchase the wines, and for some modest price, you get the wines, and you get like for vertical tasting, you get a charcuterie board. It's either curbside pickup or it's delivered to you. And then coming up here, they're doing this shared experience of like, you get a link to an online Zoom and someone will walk you through the wine tasting. And I love this idea of, you know, less sort of a more creative way of touch points. So, you know, it got me thinking, like, how do you translate that to jewelry? And I think it depends on who you are and where you are in the industry, but think about the kind of events that you do that are really successful for you. If that means that you're traveling to stores and you're doing these, for lack of a better word, gemstone roundtables, is there a way to actually virtually translate that? Is there a way that you could have great lighting, great camera, you know, on whatever device, and actually show gemstones, you know, and you know, have people be able to maybe put dibs on those in the chat, or maybe whatever they think is appealing, you send it out on approval. Is there a way to kind of recreate our experiences? If you did cigars and whiskey for men, either at Mother's Day or at Christmas, is there a way to send them a great bottle of whiskey, a box of cigars, and have a Zoom chat with some of these clients? Really look at what is your singular personality, what do you do well, and see what is it that you can translate. Virtual trunk shows are okay, but like, you have to really, there's got to be something that goes beyond and really kind of either resonates with people, helps people, or is just maybe fun. Jack, again, I'm going to use Jack Lewis Jewelers. They did Blingo, and I thought this was particularly genius. He and Missy, I think, came up with this in their downtime, and he had bingo cards made. You can have things made online, and featured different designers and brands in the squares. And then they ended up with, you know, 20 plus people joining them. And he's like, they don't know each other. How are they going to interact? But everybody poured themselves, you know, a glass of wine, and there were prizes, and you have a pretty good odds of walking away with a prize if there's only 20 of you. And then it's a chance to kind of talk about and reinforce your brands as well. So I thought that was really great. But again, not necessarily to wholesale sort of copy that idea, but the idea of how do you reinforce jewelry? How do you reinforce, keep your name out there, make sure people know that you care. I kind of feel like if we take this to a question where, you know, people need jewelry. Don't apologize for selling jewelry. Don't apologize for selling what is essentially connection. So during this time, I think if we are real, we are human, and ask it more from the standpoint of how do we take care of our teams and our community and stay true to our values and our brand, that is going to actually help you answer the question of what is appropriate, what is good, and what is what's going to work for you for marketing right now. So thank you. That kind of concludes my presentation part of things. And I'm going to go to Q&A and see if there's any questions I can answer. I'm happy to answer any questions for you too afterwards. You can reach me, monica@idazzle.com, or if you follow me on Instagram, you can actually send me a DM. I try to look at all the platforms and try to answer and be responsive. So I'm going to, looks like no open questions. So if anybody has anything they would like to ask, I'm happy to answer. Maybe I will stop my screen here. And let's see. There's a few people in the chat. John, thank you. Thanks for responding, John. Blingo worked really well, so I'm glad. I loved using that as an example. I think that was particularly genius. So does anyone have any questions? Do you have any ideas to throw out there, I'm happy to take a look. And if not, I can let you go back to your coffee or whatever it was that you were doing. Oh, wait. Oh, do you have any ideas or suggestions that would work better for suppliers? So I think that some of the things that I've suggested, even if it was a bit on the retailer side, I think that there are still things that could work from the standpoint of suppliers. I think thinking about your partners, your retailers or your customers, and thinking about what they might need right now, and maybe you reach out and you ask them what that might be. I know that Naveed and I were going to try to brainstorm a little bit more about that idea of maybe a virtual kind of experience. So there's not an easy way. It depends on the relationship that you already have with your suppliers. Um, but if you, I think there's a few nuggets in what I just presented that could work, whether that is, I don't know if you use social media, but social media can be used very effectively B2C as well. I'm sorry, B2B as well as B2C. So all of the things that we do, I mean, I know it's reaching consumers, but really I am a supplier. So a lot of what I'm doing is reaching the trade through my Instagram. And I think if we look at our customers, what they might need, how we might connect with them, and it could be in that very caring, maybe a little bit more, how can I support you right now? And then Ginger, if a retailer is new to this type of marketing, where do they start first? If you don't have, social media, you really need to utilize this. I'm hoping that, the jewelry industry tends to resist technology. And I believe that right now, there's never been a better time to actually kind of leverage that. And it's kind of put us all on, including myself, and I thought I was doing okay, but we have to fast track that. And if you don't already have Instagram, Facebook, I really feel like that's a very good way to start, because you can actually test ideas there. It's low risk. You can float different things that you would maybe never be willing to invest in for a print campaign or a radio campaign. That's not where your customers are right now. They are probably on Instagram and Facebook. You really need to leverage those properties. I also would say that there's a few resources out there. Jen Cullen-Williams is doing some really great PR consulting. Ben Smithy and the Smithy Group, I know that they were all over Virtual Conclave, and so they really do have some great ideas of taking your maybe informal social media and maybe applying a little bit more rigor to it, and actually starting to develop like a real campaign. It's okay to spend a little bit of money on social media marketing, and it might be the best dollars spent right now. So I think, with all of these things, staying true to your brand is going to be really important. If you're a very serious brand and you start to try to use humor right now, people are going to sense that that's not comfortable for you. So even though you might have a knee-jerk reaction to kind of shift course and do something very different than what you've done before, you have to be really careful about that right now. I think it's people will react to that. So think about what you've done in the past, what's worked in the past, and kind of figure out ways if there's a creative way that you can spin that without completely losing your personality in the process. Okay, there's another question. Retail jewelry business, haven't yet reached out to my connections in my previous industry. Oh, this is hard. there's a number of people who have probably started businesses. I've heard of a few designers who are all ready to launch their business, retailers who are all ready to open or open their remodeled store, and now there's no way of connecting with those people kind of in a more personal way. There is so Kara Wayne, invite people into the store, but thinking of sending out an email from my personal account, experience with LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn is actually a pretty underutilized property, at least from my standpoint. I know people who are really successful with that. That's definitely a platform that you should be utilizing everything. If you know how to work TikTok, you should do it. I didn't include TikTok in here because I'm still kind of finding my feet with that. But anything that LinkedIn has been very successful for a number of people. I do feel like email could still be an important way of reaching people right now. We have to be careful not to inundate people. It felt like for a while I was getting constant updates of here's what we're doing for, COVID-19. So, but I think a very considered, beautiful email to people like, hey, I'm ready to launch this business. Here's how to reach me. I hope that you have, Kara, maybe some sort of digital presence where if people want to connect with you and want to, if they can buy something or at least browse or peruse something digitally, I think that is really important. And maybe that's as simple as your social media. We sell a fair amount off of our social media, even though we don't have it linked specifically to a detail page that someone can click on and buy. It's more of a hand holding, kind of walking them through the purchase process, but it definitely is a selling vehicle. So I would make sure that you have a way of referring people. If you're going to do an email, make sure your website is like photo ready, or make sure that you have a place to kind of refer people to so that they have a destination. Let's see. I'm a catalog retailer. I plan out really far in advance. However, we have many digital platforms. Do you have any recommendations that I should be putting in my catalogs for messaging that I can tie into my digital platforms? So that is, let's see, in my catalogs. Yeah, I think that digital and physical should really be working in tandem. And anywhere you can put, like I've seen a number of emails go out and things where people are not putting their social in their signature. If you are going to do a postcard, if you're going to do any kind of print, you should absolutely be making sure that you are reinforcing digital media in all of that, and vice versa. I really think social is the way to reach people, especially if you have that kind of major lead time for your catalogs. People are used to immediate feedback and immediate interaction. So trying to engage with people, a lot of people are using stories, Instagram stories and Facebook stories really well. With interaction, do a poll, yes or no, do a swipe up to, an existing catalog page. Tying some sort of action to things online is also going to get a lot more engagement. So, I'm glad to see that print media is still alive, but you really have to integrate that with your digital as well. And the more consistency people see with that, I think the better off that you will be. Again, consistency is key. Consistency with your brand, consistency of message, authenticity of that message, but you really have to, you can't treat them as separate things. There's not digital and there's not print. They actually really work very, very closely together. And then there's, please mention again the two companies helping with marketing campaigns. So maybe I should actually type, I'm going to type this in. So Ben Smithy of the Smithy Group and they have a lot of resources. You can start very small. I don't, it's not like you're going to have to spend, I think, a ton of money. And actually right now they're doing a fair amount of consulting just to help kind of guide people a little bit. So it might be something to at least check out. The other person that is, she's a, she is a PR whiz. And it's Jen Cullen Williams, and she was very active. I think she did at least a couple of panels on virtual conclave. I would also urge people to check out those resources. So AGS has all of these webinars that people are doing. They have them on YouTube for free. And then Conclave, I believe there are recaps of those sessions. And so those are going back over, like, I feel like I could benefit actually myself going back over some of those presentations. So I would recommend maybe checking those out too, because there's a lot of really great ideas and resources in there. Oh, thanks, Megan. See, my Megan, my colleague, she's sending out the actual links. This is why she gets paid the big bucks. She's amazing. I hope that I have answered most questions. Again, you're welcome to email me or DM me if you have something kind of more specific, or if you have an idea or campaign that you were thinking of running and you want to just kind of another set of eyeballs on that. I'm happy to take a look at that as well, or answer any questions for you. So there's a number of really great Instagram. I'm trying to think of a few suppliers maybe that you could follow. Marla Aaron is amazing. That would be a definite must follow. She is at Marla Aaron on Instagram. And she just does an amazing job of, connecting with her, not just the end consumer, but also her partners and supporting her retail partners. So she would be a great one to look at as a supplier standpoint. Yes, she does direct to consumer, but she also spends a fair amount of time supporting her retailers. So she would be a good one to look at. I think there might be some gem dealers I'll have to think of. Thanks again, Megan. So we are, we're in a kind of an interesting time right now, but it doesn't change the fact that we have to kind of stay true to kind of marketing. You have to tell your story a lot. You have to tell it over and over and over again. And sometimes Megan and I look at each other and we're like, I feel like we've said this like 5,000 times already. And the issue is that it takes 10,000 times to really make an impression. So don't be afraid to experiment. Don't be afraid to put things out there. Don't be afraid to be a little bit creative. But if you have that moment where you're like, I'm not sure this is really appropriate, make sure to get a second opinion, or maybe that's a sign that you shouldn't maybe post that if it's super off the deep end. But I think a little bit of creativity can go a long ways right now. People are pretty forgiving. You can try different things. Like I said, social media is a pretty fertile, pretty fertile training ground for what you might want to implement longer term. So trying some of these things out now so that you can ultimately end up with a campaign that might work for you later this year, I think is great. Ginger put another, All the Brilliance. Yeah, she does a nice job. She does a lot of live kind of like video type presentations. And I think that's video is really, if a picture tells 1,000 words, a video is like 1.5 million. Like, so again, don't be afraid of live. Don't be afraid of video. It doesn't have to be perfect and slick and produced. People really want kind of that glimpse of real right now. So I think we are at about 45 minutes, which probably means we should wrap it up. But thank you all for joining. I really appreciate your time and attention. And I hope everyone survives this. Everyone thrives ultimately, and learns a little bit along the way. So let me know if I can help. Thank you so much, and thank you, AGS. Thank you.